Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. My name's Beckwith. I'm an EEG technologist. Today I was in the hospital and I had an interesting experience with a patient. So I did a patient who had a traumatic brain injury. It had something to do with the car accident and I had to do their EEG. Well, so when I walked in, I noticed that the patient had a neck brace on. So they probably had some sort of spinal fracture, neck fracture or something. So how are you going to get a neck roll propped up behind the patient's head to put the electrodes in the back, O1 and O2 on? That's a very difficult thing to do. So I went in there to assess the situation, see if I could even stick the towel roll behind the patient's neck, because sometimes when they have a neck brace you can, and in other situations like today, I wasn't able to fit the towel roll behind the patient's neck. And sometimes another thing you can try is, instead of like a full thick towel roll, you can unroll it a little bit, make it a little bit thinner, so maybe you can fit it behind the neck somehow. That really wasn't working out either. I wasn't able to really move this patient. Like, you know, when you're in a car accident, you have a bunch of broken bones. They really needed my help and they needed this EEG, because after some traumatic brain injury, you have a higher risk of developing seizures even if you've never had it before. So I was not about to give up on this EEG because it was important that it was done. So I went to my backup plan. My first backup plan really was just work with what you have. So the patient was already laying on a little bit of sheets, so I kind of like tried to bunch up the sheets behind the patient's neck, trying to make a little makeshift, just something to prop up the head a little bit, barely, so maybe I could slide my hand under the back of the head. Wasn't that helpful, and the patients are usually sometimes laying on one side, so one side will be more exposed than the other. So the frontal electrodes, those are easy to put on. The ones in the back are the ones that really give you trouble, especially if you don't have a neck roll. So what is the backup plan? Well, the backup plan is you can ask the patient to turn their head to the side, and since the circumference electrodes, the ones that go around in a circle, kind of like a headband, this is why I call it the headband, guys. Those ones, you can just have them turn their head to the side like this, and it will show the back of the head. But you really got to double check where you're placing the electrodes if you're doing this. You got to make sure they're equally distant, and that way you get the best reading for the doctor. So they were already turned on one side, so I was able to get one side and I was able to get the center on, but the other side was a little more difficult. That's usually how it goes, guys, because the patients are probably tilted to one side, and if they have a bunch of broken bones or a broken neck or spine or whatever, they're not really going to be able to turn. So I just did my best, and I feel like I need a neck brace after that. I was crouching down, I was getting on my knees, I was tilting my head, I was trying to feel around. And in this situation, you can't really measure perfectly, so you kind of have to use your fingers. One thing that I like to do if I can't measure perfectly and there's no way, I like to use my fingers to be like, oh yeah, this is equal distance, this is equal distance, this is equal distance. Just so it feels like they're equally spaced, because if the electrodes are too close together, it's going to make the EEG waves more flat. If they're too spread apart, they're going to make the EEG waves go higher, and that's going to change the doctor's interpretation of the EEG. So as EEG technologists, we got to make sure they're equally distant, and that's why measuring is important and knowing all the different electrode sites. So I was able to somehow get the electrodes on this patient's head, and since I had traumatic brain injury, they were kind of not very cooperative. Like at one point, their hand went up to rip them all off, because they're not really oriented to their surroundings or the year or anything like that. So if someone's touching your head and you're not really with it, yeah, you might want to rip the things off that some guy's scrubbing on your head and placing things on. So I understand that. But luckily, the family was there to help out. Guys, if you have family members who are willing to help you out, hey, take advantage of it. They were able to help keep the patient's hands away from their head, and we were able to pull it off. and get 30 minutes of recording. One bad thing about this recording though is there's a ton of artifact. Since the patient was kind of restless and aggressive, they're moving around all the time. And when they move around, that causes one, muscle artifact, and two, an artifact called electrode pops. So that's when the electrode maybe like brushes up against a pillow or something. It'll cause like a little spike on the EEG. And it will just be the electrode that got touched or moved. It will just be in that electrode. It won't spread to any other electrodes. Like if it was an epileptic spike, you'd see a spike in one electrode and then an aftergoing slow wave, and it will spread to the other electrodes. It's called having a field. I'm sure you guys know about this, and if you don't, this is a good lesson. And the electrode pops, they don't have the aftergoing slow wave either. So seeing all this artifact on the EEG made me think of my artifact reduction software. So yeah, I'm really good at removing or reducing muscle artifact on the EEG. My brother has trained a neural network to reduce eye blink artifact or eye movement. And another thing we're gonna add is electrode pop artifact reduction. That's a big thing, especially on patients in the epilepsy monitoring unit. You're gonna have a lot of electrode pops throughout the day. They're sleeping in the bed. Maybe they roll around. You know, to a trained EEG technologist, you can easily distinguish an electrode pop versus an epileptic discharge, but it'll definitely be nice to have when you're looking at either the trends of the brain data, it's called quantitative EEG, or if you're unsure. If you're unsure, you can always press the artifact reduction button and see what it thinks and help you make a more informed decision, especially if you're just learning. Because I remember when I was just a student, I was with my supervisor who has been doing this for like 20 plus years, and we were looking at an EEG that a resident neurologist read through. So they were like a first year doctor neurologist, and they read through the EEG because this was at a teaching hospital, which makes sense because they took me on as a student as an EEG technologist. We were looking at that EEG. I was like, hey, isn't that artifact? And they were like, yeah, Jared, you're right. That is an artifact. It's called an electrode pop. I'm like, oh my God, I was right. And the doctor was wrong. Doctors are not infallible beings, especially ones who it's their first year reading EEG. So we have to, because there's all different levels of people reading these squiggly lines that we call EEG. So we want to make it as easy as possible for the doctors to come to the best conclusion about the EEG. And this artifact removal software, I think, will play a big role in that, lead to better outcomes for the patient. And because at the end of the day, it's what's best for the patient. That's what you really got to focus on when you're making products, I think. The patient is the real customer here. So whatever's best for them is what I'm gonna make. We'll see if I can make something pretty cool. That's my goal, guys. But yeah, this was just my quick little experience of me doing an EEG on a patient with a neck brace where I couldn't really get a towel roll behind their head. It's tough, but you just gotta do your best, guys. Gotta do your best. And I'm glad I was able to do this, because patients who have traumatic brain injury, they're at a higher risk for developing seizures. So it was good that I fought and made sure this EEG was done, just in case there was any epileptic discharges on the EEG for the doctor to see. So it was a good day, guys. Successful day. Mission accomplished. Thank you guys all for watching. I will see you guys on the next video. Make sure you hit the like button. I appreciate it. And peace out, guys.